So, good morning everyone. We are the group 6 members. Tanador Judy Ann S. Tuban Jisa May. Ventilero Rose May H. Velasquez Mary Ann. And you Trisha May. The first reporter is Jessa Tuban. The lesson 21, Understanding Sexual Harassment.
Good day everyone, this is Jessamine D. Tuban, and our topic for today was all about lesson 21, Understanding Sexual Harassment. What is sexual harassment? Sexual harassment is a behavior and it is defined as unwelcome behavior for a sexual nature. And there are some example, a man whistle at the woman when she walks by. For example, nang naniagi nga bayi, dahil atong yaga-yagaan, bawal mo na siya rong panahon na kay nakadisrespekta sa isig kabayi. Hunaw-naon na to, what if ato igso, ato ibutang sa atong side nga kita'y babae, ako'y lalaki, then ato hunaw-naon, usa ta magkuanay mo, lakaw nga, babae, di ba nay uban magbinastos, good, nay mula ko babae tihulan nila bisag wa sila kabalo nga nakadisrespect sila sa usag kabay o ginatawag po na siya sexual harassment in short. Or a woman looks man up and down when he walks, kana ganing na ay kitabay pod dili ra sa laki ang biktima ni mabayo malaki or mabayi, same ra gud ta nga makabiktima og sexual harassment kay dili man na siya nugod kanang abig bayi ta kita ray maka-experience na dili pod pwede pod sila mga lalaki. Dayon, verbal referring to an adult as a girl, Hank, doll, babe, or honey. Whizzing at someone, cat calls, hi chicks, that is cat calls. Kanang naimuagi nga mga bayi atong hi miss, binuangan nato. Mao po na siya example pod sa sexual harassment. Making sexual comments about a person's body, like anong mga marites kayo, mga chismosa, kanang si kabayi ilang bantayan ng lawas, para or making sexual comments or innuendos, turning work discussion to sexual topics. Dili sa tanang panahon ang atong kaistorya mga open-minded. So let's be atong ibutang sa atong mind nga kita tanan dili ta pareg una. So then telling sexual jokes or stories di na siya maayo guys ha, kay nay uban dili open-minded. So it means once ang tao dili open-minded, di ko na sila maistoryahan about ana kay ilang una na bastos na guta bisag sa tuon parang nato dili bastos kaayo pero sa ilang bastos na kay na. So as I told last time sa akong report, di gud ta magminaayo mag-istoryaan na kay di ta parehag mga una. Asking about sexual fantasy, preference, or history, bawal na siya guys. Okay, that's a part of sexual harassment. Or asking personal question about social or sexual life, it should be in privacy. So bawal ta magpangutanaan sa uban kay mauna sa ilang private life. Then making kissing sound like a howling and smacking lips, bawal na siya. Making sexual comments about the person's clothing, anatomy, or looks, repeatedly asking out a person who is not interested. Then, sexual harassment includes many things like actual or attempted rape or sexual assaults, and this is most common for today. Daghang biktima ni especially mga kabataan or mga bayi. Pwede po may tabo sa mga laki. So it means ang sexual harassment common gani siya na itabo dere sa kalibutan nato og nakadaghan ang kaso niya. Then unwanted pressure for sexual favors, bawal gud ta mga favor sa usa bisag sa uyab nato or sa kuan. Kung di ta sugtan, di ta mamugos. Kay we should respect our partners. Then, unwanted deliberate touching or leaning over, cornering, or pinching. Bawal gud ta magikap-ikap sa usag ka tawo bisag aton panang kaila kay ginatawag gud na siya sexual harassment and bawal po na siya. Then, unwanted letters, telephone calls, or materials of a sexual nature. Bawal po gud na siya nang magbinastos sa tawag ng about anang ingana dayon. Atong ibutang sa una-una, we should respect each other and di ta magpataka unsa na sa atong una-una mapod kay magmahay namon maulay kay pwede ta mapriso o mangilabuta sa usag ka tawo. So ang biktima na po ng sexual harassment dili ra bay, dili ra pud laki. Ay dili bay, dili laki. Apil po lang transgender, tanan kita tanan LGBT members. Kita tanan nakaagiana. Ay ang uban nakaagiana. So we should put in mind nga we should always respect each other if layhan mo respect sa sa inyong kagalingan. That's all. Thank you.
So, the continuation of the lesson 21 is the lesson 22, Women's Issues and Development, or we so-called WID. So, Women in Development or WID. So, what is WID? So, it is approaches of development projects that emerged in the 1960s calling for treatment of women's issues and development projects. So, it is the integration of women into the global economies by improving their status and assisting in total development. These approaches that calls for greater attention to women in development and policy practice, it emphasizes the needs to integrate them into the development process. So it shows women as a group that lacks of opportunity to participate in development. So, the main task of this is that to improve women's access the resources and their participation in the development. This was the best way to improve women's positions in society. Although it had limitations, increased the visibility of women in development. Place for women's issues at the UN and other international development agencies. The United Nations, or we called UN, declared that decade of 1975 to 1985 to be the decade for women. One of the major achievements of the decade was establishment of Women in Development Structure or missionaries. So the goal is to develop the best way to improve women's position in the society. So women in development with it serve as a starting point of making known to the international community that the sector of women has to be part of programs for development. The United Nations or UN declared that the decade of 1975 to 1985 to be the decade for women. So we have the WID office activities. So first is WID office supports activities in general integration, the women's legal rights, and the women's and economic growth. So we have the approaches. So women in development or WID. First approach is welfare approach. Earliest approach predominant 1950 to 1970. Aim is to bring women into the development as a better mothers. 6 to meet practical gender needs in the role through a top-down, hands-out of food aid, measures against malnutrition, and family planning. Second approach, aim of which was to eliminate discrimination, revaluing of women's contribution, and shares of benefits from development. Also dealt with the both that productive and reproductive roles as a responsibility of government. So women as active participants organizing to bring about necessary changes. The third approach, the anti-poverty approach, focuses on both the reproductive and productive role of women with an emphasis on satisfaction of basic needs and the productivity of women, requires access to income generation and wage employment. The last is reinforce the basic needs and ignore the strategic needs of women. So the efficiency.
So the fourth approach is the efficiency approach. So it aims to have increased production and economic growth with an emphasis on full use of human resources. Then we have the fifth is the empowerment approach. The aim of the empowerment approach is to increase the self-reliance of women and to influence change at the policy, legislative, and societal, economic, and other levels to their advantages. Then we have Women and Development, or the so-called WAD. So Women and Development approach arose in the later part of 1970s. The main argument of WAD was that women have always been part of the development processes. WADs focus on the interaction between women and development processes rather than purely on strategies on the integrate women into development. WAD saw both women and men as not benefiting from the global economic structures because of the disadvantage due to class and the way wealth is distributed. WAD saw global inequalities as the main problem facing poor countries and the citizens of those countries.
So GAD, gender and development. So gender and development, reflection on the development experience of women give rise to gender and development. God looks at the impact of development on both women and men. Gender and development, or God. God looks at the impact of both women and men. God is not concerned with the women exclusively, but with the way in which gender relations allot specific roles, responsibilities, and expectations between men and women, often to the detriment of women. So the summary of WID, WAD, and God evolved towards achieving women empowerment since the mid-19th century and up to present. Aside from that, several practical approaches had been utilized to underscore the role of women in nation building and vice versa. The evolution of the theories and approaches only state that the women empowerment is a developing principle alongside development of the country.
Hello everyone, my name is Trisha Mayu. So now I'm going to report gender equalities and marriage and criminal law. So what is marriage? So the definition of marriage is a special contract or permanent union between a man and woman, enter into the accordance with the law for the establishment of conjugal and family life. It is a foundation of the family and invaluable social instruction. So marriage na to diri sa Pilipinas is only applicable in men and women since before daghan ang ganahan magpakasal sa LGBTQ apan gidili gyapon ginaalaw ang men to men, woman to woman since especially sa church kay dili na siya maitubangan sa Ginoo. So marriage is a holy sacrament according to the Bible, joins together by two individuals that love each other and promise the Lord that they will stay together as one. So that's all for the definition of marriage. So next, in Article 15, Section 2, 1987, marriage law in the Philippines are only based on sex, not on gender. In 1987, Philippines Constitution, marriage states as an invaluable social institution. It is a foundation of the family and be shall be protected by the state. So in Article 15, marital law is only good for applicable for men and women. It gives exception to the LGBTQ community. If you are a member of LGBTQ, you are not allowed to get married. There are no law consentee marriage in LGBTQ community. So next, Family Code of the Philippines. So in Article 1, the Family Code of the Philippines, under the Family Code, marriage is defined as a special contract, a permanent union between a man and a woman, enter into the accordance with the law for the establishment of conjugal and family life. So, in Article 1, marriage is called a special contract since it is unchangeable. It is for a lifetime. Maybe you could change a lover, but the marriage of the contract would still remain. So that's next. So Article 14, the Family Code of the Philippines, in case either or both the contracting parties not having been emancipated by the previous marriage or between the age of 18 to 21, they shall, in addition to the requirements of the preceding articles, exhibit to the local registrar the consent of their marriage of their father and mother, surviving parents or guardian, or the person having legal charge of them in order mentioned. So in Article 14, in the age of 18 to 24, kinahanglan og counseling or advice sa ilahang parents for the authority. Kay kung nay mo disagree nilang duha, dili maligal ang ilahang licensed marriage. So next. So in Article 96, the administration and enjoyment of the community property shall belong both sponged jointly. In case of disagreement, the husband decision shall prevail, subject to recourse to the court by the wife of proper remedy, which must be availed within 5 years from the date of the contract implementing such decision. So, in Article 124, the administration and enjoyment of the conjugal partnership shall belong to both sponsors jointly. In case of disagreement, the husband decision shall be prevailed, subject to recourse to the court by the wife proper remedy, which must be availed within the 5 years from the date of the contract implementing such decision. So in Article 211, the father and mother shall jointly exercise parental authority over the person of their common children. In case of disagreement, the father decision shall be prevailed unless there is a judicial order to the contrary. So in Article 225, the father and mother shall jointly exercise the guardianship over the proper and unemancipated common child without necessity of the court appointment. In case of disagreement, the father decision shall be prevailed unless there is a judicial order to the contrary. So that's all. Thank you.
So I am the last reporter. My name is Mary Ann S. Villases, and our topic is all about gender inequality in marriage and criminal law. So higher burden on women or wives than men or husbands. The crimes of adultery and concubinage include the concept of marital infidelity. Adultery involves a wife who engages into sexual intercourse with a man but not her husband. On the other hand, concubinage involves a husband who has first sexual intercourse with a woman not his wife under scandalous circumstances. The second one, kept another woman in the conjugal home or cohabiting with another woman in another dwelling. So here for the crime of adultery to be proven, the mere sexual intercourse with a man not her husband or wife suffice. In contrast, for the crime of adultery, the sexual intercourse must be committed under scandalous circumstances, not a mere sexual intercourse. The wife in an adultery case incurs a higher penalty than that for the erring husband in concubinage. A penalty of imprisonment is also imposable and paramore in adultery, but only the penalty of desterro or banishment falls in the concubine in concubinage. So, next is the forgiveness clause in the crime of rape, RA 8353, or the anti-rape law. The anti-rape law, RA 8353, it contains that can easily exonerate the offender and can further endanger the victims. So in the law, it was stated that subsequent valid marriage between the offender and the offended party shall extinguish the criminal action or penalty imposed. So rape is committed by a man who shall have sexual intercourse with a woman under any of the following circumstances. First, through force, threat, or intimidation, when the victims is deprived of reason or unconscious, fraudulent machination or grave abuse of authority, and when the victim is under 12 years old of age or is demented, even if none of the above circumstances are present. So by any person who under any of the above circumstances commits an act of sexual assault by inserting his penis into another person's mouth or anal orifice, or any instrument or objects into the genital or oral orifice of another person. So who can be raped? Anyone can be raped victim, but the incidence of rape is more rampant in women and girls. Who can commit rape? Any man or woman may be held liable for rape, and it is possible that a man may rape his own wife and act them as marital rape. The penalty for rape in general may apply on the offender who commits marital rape. So how is the crime punished? So the penalty varies depending on the act itself and the circumstances surrounding it. So it may imprisonment from 20 to 40 years that it is imposed on the offender if rape is committed through sexual intercourse. So imprisonment from 6 to 12 years, it is imposed on the offender if rape was committed through oral or anal sex or through the use of any object. Imprisonment from 12 to 20 years, it is depending on the circumstances surrounding the crime. So the last part is the exclusive definition of prostitution. In Article 232 of the Revised Penal Code, it retained the decades-old definition of prostitutes as women who for money or profit habitually engage in sexual intercourse or lascivious conduct. So this is the practice of engaging in relatively indiscriminate sexual activity in general with someone who is not a spouse or a friend in exchange for immediate payment in money or other valuables. Prostitutes may be female or male or transgender, and prostitutions may entail heterosexual or homosexual activity, but historically most institutes have been women and most clients are men. So following this definition, a man who peddles sexual acts for profits is in effect invisible in the eyes of law, thus making the act thereof immune to imprisonment. So that's the last part, and that's all.